Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wondered if our brain activity when we're just relaxing could tell us something important about mental health conditions like Obsessive-Compulsive Disorder, or OCD? Well, this new study dives deep into that very question. This study asks a pretty fundamental question for understanding OCD. We know OCD is a tough condition, but finding objective markers in the brain hasn't been easy. Researchers are exploring brain activity measured by EEG when people are just resting. But there are different ways to look at this EEG data, and we don't know which ones are the most useful. This paper tries to figure out if looking at how much brain waves power up in different areas is better, or if looking at how brain areas talk to each other, their coherence, is more telling for identifying OCD. They wanted to see which of these signals is stronger and more stable. So imagine your brain as a symphony orchestra. Some parts of the orchestra might be playing louder or softer, that is like the power of brain waves in a specific area. Other parts might be playing in perfect rhythm together, synchronized, that is like the coherence between different brain areas, showing how they're communicating. This study took resting. State EEG data from people with OCD and healthy people. They used a smart machine learning technique called random forest. And importantly, they made sure their testing process was really strict to avoid tricks and overpromising results. They specifically compared how well power signals from EEG could tell OCD from healthy brains, versus how well coherence signals could do the same. Here is how they did it. They took EEG data from 46 people with OCD and 95 healthy people. But then they made the healthy group the same size as the OCD group to keep things fair. They split the data into 5 different groups called folds. For each fold, they trained their computer model on 4 of the groups and tested on the 5th. This is called cross-validation. And it is a way to get a more reliable estimate of how well the model works. What's really important here is that they were super careful to prevent something called data leakage. This means they made sure the model didn't accidentally get hints about the answers from the test data while it was learning. They used a technique called SHAP, which is like a detective for machine learning models, to figure out which specific EEG signals were most important for making predictions. They did this feature selection only on the training data within each fold to keep that leakage out. They looked at different frequency bands in the EEG, including the often overlooked high beta and gamma bands, which are related to things like cognitive control. Now for the results. When they looked at the power signals, how loud each brain area was playing, the model basically guessed randomly. Its accuracy was around 50%, which is what you'd expect if you were just flipping a coin. This suggests that just looking at how much activity there is in one spot of the brain by itself wasn't very helpful for telling people with OCD apart from healthy individuals in this dataset. But when they looked at the coherence signals, how well different brain areas were synchronized and communicating, the model did a bit better. It wasn't amazing, but it was definitely above chance. This hints that how brain regions connect and communicate might hold more clues about OCD than just how active individual regions are. Even though the coherence model performed better, a really crucial finding was that no single EEG signal was consistently picked out as important across all the different tests they ran. This means that the specific signals the model found useful could change depending on which data split it was looking at. This lack of stability is a big red flag. It tells us that while there might be some differences, they aren't super strong or consistent. So, what does this all mean? The study suggests that measures of brain network communication, or coherence, might be more promising for understanding OCD than just looking at the power of brain waves in isolation. However, and this is a really important takeaway, neither method, even the better one, was good enough to be used in a clinical setting for diagnosis. The performance was modest at best, and critically, the signals they found were not stable. This means we can't rely on them consistently. The researchers are very clear about their main findings. First, the absolute power approach was a bust, performing at random guessing levels. Second, coherence showed some promise, outperforming power, but it was still not good enough for real-world use. Third, and perhaps most importantly, the features they identified as important were unstable. They didn't see the same patterns showing up reliably across all their tests. This instability is a key point. It means that while they found something, it is not something we can confidently build a diagnostic tool on yet. They emphasize that even though high-frequency bands like high beta and gamma showed up sometimes, their inconsistent selection means we can't jump to conclusions about them being reliable biomarkers for OCD scrobe. Comparison with previous studies Study Center, they also put their findings in context with other research. They note that other studies using the same public dataset have reported much higher accuracies, sometimes near perfect. But they caution that these high numbers can be misleading, especially with small datasets. Their careful approach using leakage, free validation, and reporting uncertainty provides a more conservative and realistic picture. They suggest that high accuracy alone doesn't prove a stable biomarker exists. Their study aimed to directly compare power and coherence under the exact same conditions. And under those controlled conditions, coherence did come out on top. This aligns with ideas that OCD might involve broader network issues rather than just local brain activity problems. Scroll key methodological considerations C-center one of the strengths they highlight is their rigorous methodology. By performing feature selection inside each cross-validation fold, they really worked hard to prevent data leakage. They also used pulled out-of-fold predictions and bootstrap confidence intervals, which helps quantify how uncertain their results are. This is good science. However, they also point out that interpretability, which SHAP provides, doesn't automatically mean stability. Just because a signal is important for a specific model doesn't mean it will be important in another study. Or with different data, the inconsistency across folds is a strong indicator of this. They also add a crucial point about interpreting coherence. It can sometimes be fooled by signals that are originating from the same place but picked up by different sensors. This is called volume conduction, and it means that what looks like communication might just be the same signal being heard in different rooms. So even the promising coherence findings need to be viewed with caution. Scrolled. Limitations and future direction C-center, the researchers are very open about the study's limitations, which is a sign of good scientific practice. First, the groups weren't perfectly matched for things like sex and age, and they didn't have information about medication or how severe the OCD symptoms were. This means they can't say for sure that the differences they saw are only due to OCD itself, and not these other factors. Second, they could only use the features that the original researchers of the dataset had already extracted. If they had the raw EG data, they could have explored other ways to measure connectivity that are less sensitive to the volume conduction issue. Third, to balance the groups. They had to discard a lot of the healthy control data. This means their findings might be influenced by which specific healthy people they kept. They suggest that future studies should try different ways of handling group imbalances or repeat the whole process with different random starting points to see if the results hold up. Fourth, they didn't do certain advanced statistical tests, like permutation testing, to really confirm if the coherence results were significantly better than chance or if selecting the top 10 features was truly beneficial for generalization. Scroll. References C-center, and importantly, they couldn't do external validation because there wasn't another public dataset like this available for OCD. This is a big hurdle. They strongly recommend that future research should focus on much larger groups. Make sure the groups are well matched, report validation procedures clearly, and try to replicate findings in independent datasets. They also mention the need to look at clinically meaningful subgroups of OCD patients. Ultimately, they conclude that while resting state EG for OCD classification is an interesting area of research, it is still very much in the exploratory phase and not ready for clinical diagnosis. So, what is my take on this? I think this study is a great example of responsible science. They didn't just chase high accuracy numbers, they dug into the stability of their findings and were very upfront about the limitations. It is important to remember that a lot of these eGML studies are done on small datasets, and it is easy to get results that look good but don't hold up in the real world. The fact that coherence seemed to show more promise than power is interesting, suggesting that how our brains network might be key to understanding conditions like OCD. But the instability they found is a crucial reminder that we're still figuring things out. For the future, I'd love to see studies with hundreds or even thousands of participants, looking at how medication and symptom severity influence these brain signals. Also, exploring different connectivity measures that avoid volume conduction issues would be a big step forward. Until then, resting state EG for OCD is an exciting research frontier, but it is not a diagnostic tool we can use tomorrow. What do you guys think? Does the idea of brain communication patterns being important for mental health make sense to you? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown helpful, please give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more science deep dives, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next episode. Thanks for watching.